So I think we can get started, Bill. We can let people trickle in. So it looks like we've got some people already participating and attending, which is great. So let's kick things off. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Practical AI for NERC CIP webinar. We're really excited to have you with us. Today, we're going to explore how responsible, explainable AI can transform compliance from manual audits to continuous readiness. So today's session is really all about practical solutions, real strategies for these regulated environments. So a couple different things. So really, we are gearing this conversation towards you. So in terms of audience, people in the energy and power industry, specifically within compliance teams. So peers within your industry will be joining us today. Please make this, engaging. Don't be shy to put stuff in the chat, ask questions. I'm more than happy to put you in a talking mode if you'd like to come on and speak. So please just let me know and I can enable that feature here. If you want to have a conversation with Bill or chime in at any time, just go ahead and put that in the chat. So let's make this collaborative. Again, this is not going to be a monologue, if you will. So we want to make this conversational and we want to really hear from you. So today we have four main topics that we like to touch on. So the paradigm shift, specifically within cognitive governance, responsible AI, safety, and all that good stuff that comes along with the responsibility of AI within the power industry. We're going to touch on a high impact use case, which will be really, really valuable to walk through that. And then Bill will share kind of like the future vision of our compliance roadmap. So, to guide us through this amazing conversation, I'm pleased to introduce our CTO, Bill Guinn. He brings really deep experience and expertise in deploying AI that's regulatory ready and built for operational resilience. So, Bill, I will turn this over to you and I will be moderating the chat with any questions.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. So you want to go to the next slide? Caitlin, can you hear me? Okay, you want to go to the next slide? Look, there you go. Okay. So, okay, guys, welcome. So a little bit of background here. We are releasing our next generation AI platform in January, and we have created something we think is quite capable of interjecting AI into the flow of change management, risk assessment, essentially something that can enforce compliance in the flow of change, in the flow of operations. So we're very interested in building out NERC CIP use cases and use cases for other verticals that have similar compliance heavy needs for tracking workflows, changes, processes, and so on and so forth. So we're going to be creating a bunch of pre-built workflows for NERC CIP using this new platform starting at the beginning of next year. We're also going to be building a new risk module that is going to go hand in glove with change management. So we want your input and participation in this so that we're on track to build what you guys need and what you're looking for. You guys are the NERC CIP experts. We're not. We're software developers, right? So the time seems right. I mean, you clearly are under a lot of pressure. The demand for energy is actually going up. It's not going down anymore. Um, uh, no doubt threats are going up and the sophistication of threats are going up. So we need to add more and more intelligence into our system to help you combat these things, to make this far more efficient and effective for you without having to build everything into a workflow yourself. So the idea here is really to introduce a new paradigm So instead of trying to keep up with NERC CIP and keep up with the changes in its requirements, and trying to build those into every workflow you have to more or less manually define, we want to add compliance into the workflows as a governing engine that sits essentially above all these workflows and is looking at the execution of all workflows from a compliance perspective. So there's a governance engine, if you will, that is helping you have compliance every step along the way as you're operating, as these workflows are executing. We believe AI can, take the lead, if you will, and look at how your workflows are executing and are they in compliance or not. So this is the new paradigm. Instead of having to manually build workflows, which, as you know, can be very brittle no matter how you build them. These are subject to any kind of change where a requirement or regulation changes. And as your systems evolve, as your business evolves, you have to go in and manage those workflows. We want to put intelligence into a platform where those workflows, again, are basically overseen by a policy engine. So if we think of this as a new steward that sits above, all your, if you will, bespoke workflows in a policy engine that understands NERC CIP's requirements, then it can be watching essentially what these workflows are doing and enforcing policy as they're executing. Now, of course, it's not that the AI is driving those workflows. You still build them, you still have a human in the loop. We're just auditing them, if you will, and looking for compliance in real time all the time, right? So by doing that, you get transparency. We're showing you what's happening, how the AI is looking at the flow of these, operational flows, if you will, and reporting on its insights. Do we believe you're violating some requirement, right? And you're going to see that in real time. So the reports, the auditability is built into the workflows without you potentially having to put every single piece in there and essentially reporting after the fact. So we believe this is all coming together. We think AI now is capable of providing this oversight, injecting it into the flow of your operations and assisting you with things that you would have to do more manually today, and you are doing more manually today. So obviously, this is going to make this much, much faster for you. Obviously, instead of having to worry about compliance sometimes too much after the fact, more as the last mile, as reporting and correlating and so on and so forth. We're doing it all along the way. So those compliance reports you're working on so diligently today are far easier to produce. In fact, we hope that ultimately these things pretty much just are a natural consequence of our auditing these workflows, right? So that's the paradigm shift. Instead of you manually just building workflows and trying to build compliance into each and every workflow, we have an engine that sits over the top of those workflows and is auditing them every step along the way because it understands the NERC CIP policies. Okay? So again, stop me if you have any questions. You want to go to the next slide, Caitlin? I'm not seeing it change. And then you're still on page 3. There we go. Okay. So sorry, this slide transition seemed to be a little slow. So clearly, when we talk about AI, there's a lot of questions and concerns about using AI in this arena. And trust me, some of the other, again, heavily compliance verticals we focus on have many of the same concerns, even though their use cases are a little bit different. How do I make sure that AI isn't hallucinating? How do I protect my data? How do I ensure that, any kind of models or large language models that are in use are tuned to what I need and no one else gets to see my data, right? So these are all the concerns that we want to be talking to you about. And we have a blueprint to do this. We have a fabric, if you will, that has these governance criteria in them. We need validation from our customers is whether these things are things that will work for you or not. So as we talk about toward the end of this meeting, a council to help us define this stuff. These are the types of things we'll be sharing with you guys. But clearly, when we talk about AI, we are also governing AI itself, right? As much as we want AI to look at how your workflows are executing and try to provide a degree of governance on those, we also need to govern AI. So there's several principles here. We don't have time to get into all of them. This is what a future discussion would end up being. But clearly, when we talk about AI, we're not talking about AI controlling your workflows. We're talking about AI interjecting its intelligence into analyzing your workflows, but you still build your workflows. There's still a human in the loop. You're still doing the approvals, right? You're still doing the analysis. But AI is there essentially as a steward, as a co-pilot, looking at what's going on and reporting to you what it sees that may be problematic, doing a risk assessment, telling you whether there seems to be an issue with a policy in this step, or you didn't record something and you need to record it, right? So, of course, what we're going to be producing is an audit trail of all this stuff, right? We're going to have a feedback loop. So as we see stuff, there's machine learning, if you will, going on. So we're seeing things, so we're not repeating. So you're not repeating past problems into future changes, so to speak. And all this will be explainable. So the logic AI uses to assess something and say, this thing is problematic, or here's a risk, or here's missing data. We're going to explain why we came up with that, the policy that is, is being assessed, the systems involved, and of course the measurements, the metrics involved, and it will be measuring these things. So instead of just saying, "Hey, I'm flagging something," it's going to tell you why it flagged it, and it's going to tell you as much as possible the KPIs or measurements involved in what it's flagging. And of course, all of this is in, at a high level, the NERC CIP requirements. So, in a little more detail, of course, what we've done and have already ingested is NERC CIP 10 and those requirements. And we've built a policy engine that has those requirements in it. So those policies involve, of course, the systems that we're looking for that are affected by each policy, the policy itself, and again, the measurements, the evidence that we need to collect around those policies and those systems, right? So this is a part of the real-time flow that's going into this engine, this kind of policy compliance engine, if you will, these cognitive workflows, as we're going to be calling them. Okay, go to the next slide, Caitlin.
So I have one quick question from Daniel from Bonneville
Yeah,
before we move on. Um, he had asked, based on the first principle on this slide, Crusade exploring on AI and change gear.
Caitlin, you're breaking up. I didn't catch that question. What's the question?
Hey, Bill, I'll try
Yeah,
and
no
keep.
worries. It's also
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Heather, go ahead.
Yes,
Caitlin, your voice is just breaking up too much. So Heather, yeah, what?
I'll fill in. That's all right. Daniel asked, based on the first principle on the slide in Service Aid, exploring on-prem AI and change gear. And then he said, can you describe how AI can support SIP 010 R2 and detecting unauthorized change?
Well, I mean, I think there's two questions here. The one of the things that we have to discover with you guys and establish is where is all this AI living, right? And how is it controlled? And I think most of you that I've talked to are saying you need AI on premise, right? You need these models running in your data center under your control and not in the cloud. And that can be done. We're not doing that currently, but after the first of the year, this is part of what we're looking at from a deployment model perspective. So you can run all this on-prem, or of course, you can run part of it in the cloud if you so choose. But we understand there's probably a requirement to run this on-premise. So again, what we are doing right now is looking at use cases for NERC CIP. And these are workflows, if you will, and how we will add in things such as risk assessment when you're creating a change, right? And how ingesting the NERC CIP 10 in particular, that's where we'll start. We'll probably go to 7 after that. We will pull in those requirements into a model. Those will be specified in terms of, like I said, policies and what those policies mean in terms of us interrogating a change, right? Interrogating what you're doing and how this is documented and how this is flowing through change gear, right? And providing you insight every step along the way. And I've got sort of an example use case toward the end of this that kind of gives you just a hypothetical example of how you would put something in the system and AI would start looking at it, responding to you, and again trying to add this audit, in real time along the way, so that compliance is built into the execution of a workflow. Hopefully that more or less answered your question, but please ask, anything else great. Good. So let's keep going. Again, please ask questions along the way. Caitlin, we'll go to the next slide. So again, the idea here is that every step along the way, we're going to explain what we're doing. We're going to show you evidence, kind of augment your workflows and say, this is what we've done. This is what we see. You get a check mark for this step or not. If not, here's what we're seeing. Here's where you have issues with particularly this particular requirement down to the requirement number in NERC CIP and what we see as the problems and how we suggest you remediate it right here, right now, before you go to the next step, right? So again, we're trying to nip stuff right when it's occurring. I mean, as you're typing this stuff in, not after the fact, right? So obviously, we're trying to put stuff into the guts in real time in the workflow. So we're monitoring what's going into the system, and we're assessing it against these policies, and we're reporting. We're producing human reportable audit trails of what we're seeing and what you're doing. So reporting, which is obviously a challenge today, and I know a lot of you would like to see upgrades, for example, in change gear to do reporting. That's a part of this. It's not so much to rewrite our reporting engine in change gear as much to build a report every step along the way using AI. So at the end of the day, you're not trying to correlate all this information. We've correlated it every step along the way. You want to go to the next slide? So let me go through essentially an example. This isn't so much as a use case, maybe as an example to show you, how we see this as being a little different than the way things work today. If you think about probably the way you would look at, say, a change request, maybe in change gear. Obviously, you're going to create change flows, different types of changes, different types of change flows, and so on and so forth. And when, say, you're entering a change, of course, you're going to essentially use change gear and other tools to assess the impact of change. That's a cognitive burden that is largely on you, right? I mean, you can see information in change gear and maybe some other systems, but really correlating all that and understanding how it all fits together is on you guys, right? And so instead of that, we're going to use AI to do that step for you. Now, of course, you're still in control. You're still looking at what we're producing, but hopefully that ends a tremendous amount of the cognitive load to do all this stuff. And of course, we can do it very, very quickly, and we can do it as deep as we have data in your system to look at, right? So we're not just looking at a few things. We can look at all of your data or all of the data that's related to historical changes that affect those assets or those policies or whatever, right? So we're correlating all this stuff again in real time. So what you're having to do in terms of looking for approvals, tracking all this stuff, we're assisting you with that every step along the way. So let's give a quick example here, or really kind of a sample of if for example you were going to create a change to firmware, right? You want to submit a firmware update request or something like that. You would create a change request, obviously, in something like change gear. And what the AI would do immediately is parse that out, look at the description, and identify and make sure that the BES cyber assets, if there exist, that they're spelled out. That if it's a high impact BES asset, that we have looked into the CMDB and we've understood all the dependencies, right? So we're going to check that. We'll cross-reference that with all the regulatory requirements, these policies as I've talked about, say in CIP 10 2 R1 for configuration change management, requirements, if you will, policies. We're going to tag all of that stuff as compliance sensitive that we need to automatically, activate, kind of this orchestration mode to assess this policy or this compliance policy, right? So the outcome of that really is potential actions that the policy engine is going to take to assess these controls before you have to consider anything. So we're assessing, if you will, the completeness of this change request, right? And saying, here's all the recommendations we have, or all the areas that you may need to fill in some gaps. And if we can see where those gaps are, provide you recommendations for what those gaps, how to fill those gaps, right? So then, of course, you start adding notes, you start adding more and more information into a change request, and we're going to automatically start looking at the vulnerability of those instructions. Maybe we'll go out and look at vendor advisories, for example. We will look outside of your platform. If we can ingest that information into your platform and look at what vendors have to say about this particular firmware level, what the risks are, what other upgrades might be impacted, so on and so forth. So we'll generate essentially a KIP 10 R1 risk assessment report for you right then, right there, automatically, looking at all the historical issues of similar changes you've made, for example. So, and again, the idea here is this isn't just a static report. This is a report that also gets into how to remediate any problems that we're seeing, right? So that impact assessment's auto-generated and mapped to the correct control. So you see that. So again, this is one of the outcomes of compliance in the flow of business, right? In the flow of operations. So maybe the next step is you're going to do a validation of the change request, right? And schedule the implementation. So again, we can help with the scheduling. try to optimize that scheduling because, of course, there's several other change requests possibly in the system, several other assets that may be changed. So we know your time is valuable. So the idea is to put some sort of optimized schedule in place so that you're not doing any more changes than you absolutely need to, but also looking at this from a risk profile perspective so that what you're doing is not adding risk by doing too many changes at the same time. So obviously it's a balance there, but we're going to look at that schedule. We're going to look at, in this case, potentially maybe down the road, KIP 4 and KIP 7 and how those could be impacted by this, how we're going to isolate boundaries for, say, KIP 5, um, and again, generate basically a checklist that says, listen, this is how we think you need to isolate this environment, how we want to make sure that you've got a baseline for capturing this before any kind of modification. Things such as reviewing, patches and authenticity of those downloads and patches and so on and so forth. So it's just a full checklist of everything we're seeing in that change request, if you will, so that the compliance, if you will, and the prerequisites for this thing can be implemented is fully fleshed out. And of course, again, we're providing you with all the requirements and all of our thinking in terms of why we think you need to do these things to make sure that this change is going to be in compliance. So maybe the next step, of course, you're going to proceed with deploying, actually go into deployment. And this is where we're going to monitor that, right? Now, depending on how deep we can go, we might be able to even assess the scripts you're running, look at the outcome of those scripts, and add that into our assessment of how things are going and whether things that you plan to do and how you said you were going to do them, you're actually conducting, right? You're actually following the plan, so to speak, and you're in compliance with your own change. So again, this is creating, of course, a digital record for KIP 10R1, right? When you get into execution. And so we're constantly looking at these logs and telemetry. If we can access it, to understand that what you're supposed to be doing, you're actually doing. So that's a bundle that we're going to create during the execution of this change, if you will. And of course, if we see something in real time, we're going to spell it out. We're going to tell you right then and right there, we're seeing something that is incomplete or out of compliance or something that wasn't considered and needs to be considered as a high risk, so to speak. This is also where you're going to see all through this that we're going to be adding a risk module where things like a risk register would be created for these items. Now, of course, you have oversight control, and you can approve or regulate, if you will, what's going into that risk register, but you'll see it and we'll be able to manage risks in a formal setting, formal risk management setting, again, using a risk register as the basis or the database for what we're looking at and managing. So maybe the next step here, of course, is we do after that a post-implementation verification, and again, this is of course really critical before you want to declare success. Obviously, we're going to look at the outcome of this. Did everything seem to go according to plan? And this is where AI is really powerful, looking at logs and understanding, is there anything in these logs that looks like there was something that didn't execute properly, right? And again, this is really, really a strength of AI to validate stuff before we declare success. And also, of course, make any recommendations for changes that need to be done or even help with any kind of rollbacks if that actually is needed. So, of course, this is also where we're going to generate a KIP 10 or 1.6, I think it is, validation report, right? So we can publish that as a consequence of that change. And then maybe the final step here, which is really more on our side than your side, is we're using all of this information going into really this cognitive fabric of ours to learn how that change took place and what went correctly, what was missing up front. So the next time the system is smarter about this stuff, right? So the system is learning all the time how these things are evolving, and it's kind of improving itself and how it can help you with these changes or any kind of policy um, anomalies it's seeing, right? Looking at historical um, um, execution. So this thing is constantly learning and constantly evolving based on what we've seen through your changes. Okay, so that was really a high level summary of what this cognitive fabric, or really how these cognitive workflows might work for you guys. There's a lot of different use cases. In fact, we've got dozens of use cases we're looking at in terms of actual workflows to create reports for you to, again, do things like schedule optimization for changes and things like this. So those are workflows, but they're workflows that would be running in the context of this cognitive engine, right? So not only are we looking at building out of the box workflows, but also having them run underneath or inside the auspices of this cognitive fabric, if you will. Do you want to go to the next slide, Caitlin? So we thought we'd do a poll. So, Heather, maybe you can jump in here. I don't know if we can hear Caitlin or not.
Yes. So Caitlin should have activated the poll. It should be popping up on your screen. In order to participate, you do have to use the QR code to submit an answer. If you do not have your phone or the ability to use that, you can submit your answer in our chat, and we'll document it that way. And if anybody has any technical difficulties, please let us know. It looks like everybody's submitting okay, so I take that as success. I'll just give everybody a few more seconds to put their submissions through. Okay. Looks like we have almost everybody. Okay, and then you should see the next question pop up. What is your preferred method of AI deployment? Okay, we think we have almost everybody, 5 of 6. Okay, and then the next one will be your top priority for 2026. When it comes to evidence management within NERC CIP. We'll give a minute for this one since this is more interactive. And again, if you're having a problem submitting through the polls or quizzes, please feel free to put it in the chat. Looks like we have 5 of 6. Awesome. Everybody has submitted. Thank you so much for your participation.
Do you want to go through this real quick, Heather?
Yeah, we can share the results. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. So everybody, thank you for participating. For the top 2026 priority, we have continuous monitoring being automated, as today most errors occur in this area, which is manual for us. Then we also have audit evidence automation with monitoring as a close second. Essentially, CIP is a separate workflow for some teams managed outside of the change control process.
Mhm.
Then we have audit evidence automation. Doing this manually takes many hours currently, I can imagine. Continuous monitoring, automated management for SIP, and then another one for continued automation improvement. And then, sorry, 1 sec.
We'll send you the results of this. I
Mhm.
don't think there's any big surprises here, right?
No, yeah, for preferred AI deployment, on-prem was a resounding 100%. And
So,
for the state of SIP evidence management, we had 60% for manual, 20% for semi-automated, and 20% for continuous and explainable.
okay.
Okay.
So I see a question. Will AI features require internet access? If so, what controls will limit information, something? Um, the short answer is no. You know, we can build AI on premise for you and have the model running in your data center, right? And so nothing ever leaves your data center, full stop. Um, we can also offer it in the cloud. And you may not be interested in that today, but we have other clients that will be doing similar things, although different use cases where they will let us run a private LLM in the cloud as long as it's not mixed with, any other clients or any other um, 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 open platforms like OpenAI or Gemini or something like that. So as long as it's contained within, a single tenant in the cloud that is essentially yours, some of our other customers are okay with that. But nevertheless, we can build an on-premise model that you run in your data center, and there's no internet access whatsoever. There's the downside to that, obviously, is that you have to do more of the provisioning of that hardware. AI takes a lot of hardware, this, takes a lot of energy, that too. So, the burden of running the stuff would be on you, of course, but we can make that as easy as possible. Unfortunately, it's getting easier and easier. These models are shrinking. They're getting cheaper to run and cheaper to administer, but that would be all a part of this next generation of our AI fabric for NERC CIP. Was there another question? I think something popped up. Heather, did you see a different question? Another question?
Caitlin mentioned what LLM is the basis of the AI being developed, US-based company, and then what are the hardware requirements to support on-prem GPUs needed?
Well, we don't have all the answers to hardware configurations yet. We're building these models, and it takes a lot of tuning on our part to minimize the size of these models and therefore give you hardware requirements. Most of this information will start sharing with you after the first of the year. And that's kind of the next slide or two I want to go through is kind of what's going on and how you can help participate in this. But at the end of the day, the again, the idea is that we're using OpenAI, we're using Gemini, we're using Claude, Anthropic, if you will. We're using multiple models for different reasons. Probably the one that, well, I can't say that yet. I'm not exactly sure which model would make the most sense for this policy engine, which would be the core that you guys would be hosting on premise. Obviously, you're not going to run ChatGPT on premise, right? So we will take a US produced model and we will tune it for NERC CIP, add this policy engine into it. And, obviously you will see the transparency of where that model came from and how it's managed itself, because I know that's a part of compliance, right? We're the source of all your software. So that's what we'll of course make completely transparent to you guys how the stuff is being built, where it's coming from, and how it's managed. Why don't we go to the next slide? If there's no other questions, I don't want to stop any ideation here, but so guys, where we're trying to go next is to really create, excuse me, an executive advisory council. And I've talked to a couple of you guys in the past about this. What we're trying to do again is have a very active group of our utility clients and have working sessions probably once a month starting next year, probably in January, where we, Service Aid, will be producing artifacts around the stuff I've been talking about. These are things around what responsible AI is, what it means to have a local LLM, and all the traceability of where that software came from and how it's managed. What are the guardrails that must be on AI itself so that you're willing to use it for the functions I'm talking about? And of course, what are those functions? What are those use cases? So the first step here really would be establishing not the use cases, but the governance around permittable AI. What do we mean by responsible AI and NERC CIP? What is practical for you guys to do with AI? We've already probably answered one of the questions. Well, it needs to be on-prem. You need to have traceability where this model came from and how it's being managed. These are the type of things that we want to completely specify early on. So what we're building, you will be comfortable using. So we want to have complete transparency into that. So again, governance of AI itself and all the policies around AI, I'm overusing the word policy here, is the first place we want to start. We want to make sure that you're comfortable with what we're doing with AI and the framework that we will be building of this policy engine, how it's going to work and how you're going to have transparency into what it's doing and how it's doing. So that's where we want to start this. And then we'll have subsequent meetings to discuss, really the guts of this framework, use cases, right? Specific use cases. And we've got dozens of them cataloged already. And I've shared this with a few of you, but we're literally going to build workflows. We're going to build use cases into this cognitive engine that will, again, not necessarily replace all the workflows you have today, but augment them from a reporting perspective, from a scheduling perspective, these types of things. And at some point, maybe they will replace some of your existing workflows, but that's something we would work with you on as well. And the platform, of course, is for you to use as well. So the idea is this platform is something we will use to build out of the box um, policy enforcement, reporting use cases, and workflows, and you can too. So this will be part of Change Gear, right? This isn't just some bolt-on, add-on product. And again, as I said, we're going to be building a brand new risk module, and we want your input into that. How do you really want something to assess risk every step along the way, track risk, risk register, so on and so forth? Because as you know, Change Gear today doesn't really have a risk module. I mean, if how you deal with risk is something you need to build into your workflows, and we're talking about building a bespoke risk module that would be available to you, and again would be just a part of all of these workflows, given this cognitive fabric we're talking about. So we would encourage you, if you're interested in participating in this, we're going to try to do all the drafting and heavy lifting on this stuff, but we need a lot of input. We don't want to build something that's not going to work for you guys. There's just a tremendous amount of development we're doing right now. NERC CIP is really the first vertical we want to build a tremendous amount of content for in 2026. So we'll be taking on other verticals later in the year, healthcare, financial services. They all have concerns similar to yours, although different use cases. A lot of the concerns are very, very similar. But we were going to start with NERC CIP. We want to build out this risk module and all of these capabilities in this platform for you guys first, and then we're going to go to these other verticals. So I would again, encourage you to contact Caitlin, and we will get back in touch with you on establishing the first meeting for this Executive Advisory Council. It's going to be in January. The agenda, and again, these are going to be working sessions. This isn't just a PowerPoint discussion like we've had today. This is going to be, here's a specification, and we need this to be essentially our own standards body to establish this stuff. What we're hoping is if we do a good job of this, this will become kind of a bespoke standard for how to use AI in NERC CIP. As you probably know, the NERC um, um, themselves, they're pretty silent on AI, right? There's not really standards and guidelines out there. So I think this is a great time to jump in and start establishing this stuff. And I think, we have a good chance of it becoming the gold standard, if you will, for use of AI in this industry. So we got some other questions. How does this AI tool differ from AI tools that respond to queries? So Heather, you want to read that question fully?
Yes. It says, how does this AI tool differ from an AI tool that responds to queries versus an AI agent that does a specific task, i.e., SIP classification reporting to WECC?
Well, I think the question really is maybe comparing this to what you've maybe seen with, say, a Chat GPT or something like that. If that's really the nature of the question, um, there's several differences here. One, as you probably know, putting aside the fact that ChatGPT is not something you could use for NERC CIP and BES assets, obviously, um, that paradigm is really a conversational paradigm, right? Where it's request response, right? You go up to it generally out of the blue and ask it to do something for you. It does it. It's kind of a one and done thing. And there's no learning, right? There's the context, as we call it in the AI world, is only limited really to the session you're in. It can remember sessions, but the context window is kind of limited, and you're kind of in the moment with it, and you get out of it what you can during that interaction. This is a platform that is going to work, again, in conjunction with and embedded into change gear. So we have access all the time to all the information in change gear. We're not limited in context windows to just something you can hand, you know, um, the AI in a for a specific change request, for example. We can look at all of your change requests if they're in context for this type of change, right? If you've touched this type of device before, any other time, if you had problems with the device before, if if there's anything out there associated with that device that's involved in this change, we have access to it if it's in the system. So that's all built into this platform. But again, I guess the big change here is that with, using, say, a chat GPT today, you're going to it in a very deliberate manner. I have something I need you to do. I'm asking you to help me do it, and so on and so forth. The difference here is you can certainly use our AI platform for that, but that's not really the paradigm we're talking about. What we're talking about is this this platform is going to be really the steward overseeing what's going on in all of your changes. All of the things you're doing related to NERC CIP. This platform can be there. Again, we've got a lot to work out here, looking at everything that's going on without you having to tell it to look at all of that stuff. You know, we'll design these use cases, these uses of AI, so that when a change is out there, it will look at that change without you having to tell it to, and um, autonomously, right? This is all about automation. We're talking about automating these workflows, automating the compliance as a part of the change management. It's just going to do this stuff. Now, of course, we're going to control how it does it, but it's just going to do it. So you don't need to tell it every step along the way to do it. You don't need to turn it on and off. It's just going to be a part of, again, monitoring what's going on. I hope that answered the question.
Then we do have another question from Daniel. Will this platform support training on organizational cyber or IT policy beyond NERC CIP standards?
Um, I'm I'm not really sure I understand the question entirely. So NERC CIP is an implementation, of course, like CIP 10, right? I mean, there's seven and a bunch of other areas. So we're going to start with 10, and we'll probably go to seven next, maybe two, whatever. I mean, this is again based on some feedback from you. Um, the it's not limited to that. Like I said, we're going to take the same platform. We're going to use it for healthcare. We're going to use it for financial services. So if there's other areas, if there's other information and knowledge bases you want us to ingest and use, we can. The platform, I mean, I did a fast 48 transform with it the other day, right? If you're familiar with that. I mean, we're not limited to any given process or any given industry. We will train a model on NERC CIP, but the question then becomes, what else do you want in there? I mean, we'll start with 10, we'll go to seven, so on and so forth. Other modules, other areas, other uses in your company are fair game, of course. And in fact, this is the beauty of the platform. You're going to have it. We're going to provide a whole bunch of NERC CIP out of the box stuff. If you want to use it for other things, you can. There's no limit to what you can do with it. I mean, in that sense, it's kind of like Chat GPT. Ask it to do anything and tell it what you need, and it'll work on it for you. I don't know if I've answered the question completely, but we can absorb a knowledge base from different sources, NERC 10, those requirements. Like I said, we've already absorbed that. We've built a policy engine around that. If you want to absorb something else in some other area of your company, we can do that too, or you can do that.
Daniel continued with, for federal utilities, we have both NERC CIP and FISMA requirements.
Right, exactly. So sure, we can handle both of those. Again, we'll probably start with NERC CIP. but the platform is generic. We just need to put together those workflows, those other workflows, and ingest that knowledge base. But the processes are essentially the same to build these workflows, right? Doesn't matter what the nature of them, you know. Okay, we're out of time, but if there's any other quick questions, happy to answer them. Great. Well, listen, otherwise, really enjoyed talking to you guys. And please reach out if you're interested in our Executive Advisory Council. We'll be sending more and more information out about that to each of you. And we will start the first meeting in January. And again, this is going to be a lengthier working session. We'll probably have one a month throughout 2026, starting with, again, the how we're going to make sure governance of AI itself, is going to be something acceptable to you guys. Thanks so much.